I'm great. How are you, Dora? What's been going on
Doing
for you?
doing really well. Yeah, thank you.
What's been arising for you these days for, all the different things that you offer?
Well, right now the thing that's most forefront is the 300-hour teacher training that I'm a part of right now. And so as a teacher trainer, it's really exciting for me to start to bring in some of the iRest principles. So iRest is integrative restoration, and it's an adaptation of a yoga nidra meditation practice. So this is really exciting for me to be teaching iRest to the students and giving them a way to, find a way for their own self-inquiry, which I think is really important by the time we're in an advanced teacher training that um, it's not just about, teaching others. You can only teach others as much as you have experienced yourself. And so iRest is a beautiful self-inquiry process where we can really deepen and work through a lot of our own challenges. And I think that in having that experience and being able to embody the practice, that we can truly become great teachers in teaching in all sorts of areas.
And I know both of us at some points have been really talking about the inner resource with our students. And I love being able to introduce that, especially as the first sort of introduction, because it's something that they can use right away because it's already there, and they're just tapping into it. And I just love that. I feel like any age group and any demographic can use the inner resource because the word doesn't matter. It's more the feeling of it, right? So even with my short sort of beginner classes that I do with puppy yoga, I try to introduce that using all the senses, and because the tangible puppies are there, and so I just say, can invite my words in, maybe about puppies, animal figures or memories, or let them float away. So they have the option. But then the puppies running around right there. And I think for a lot of them, they're there for the puppies, not really for yoga. So it might resonate for them. And they can, you see it, the dopamine and the oxytocin and everything sort of arising in them. So I love the inner resource practice for everybody. How do you have you found it with your students?
Yeah, it's really the one of the first practices that I would teach anyone who, whether they come to my class or see me in my private sessions or in the teacher training. It's one of the first things that I teach is the inner resource, which is, I feel like it's a foundation of the practice for me. And so for those who might be new and wondering what the inner resource is, the inner resource practice is essentially a practice for us to get in touch with a felt sense of safety within ourselves. And so in the iRest practice, oftentimes we might say, is there a place where you might feel safe or secure, or where you feel at ease? Or even a place where you feel okay if safety is not something that you resonate with. Or maybe there's a certain person that you feel really supported by, where who you feel safe with or who you feel at ease with. Maybe there's an animal, maybe it's an object, right? And so we start to kind of explore, we do a little exploration with our students to help them find whatever it might be to tap into that feeling of feeling grounded and centered and at ease within themselves. And then really amplifying, if you like, or cultivating, that might be a better word, cultivating that feeling of that, what we call the inner resource, this feeling of safety and security and well-being in the body. And then from that place, it changes our experience of the world. When we're feeling safe within our bodies, we're coming from a place of calm and peace. We're much more able to respond constructively to our circumstances. Whereas when we're coming from a place of fear or defensiveness, we oftentimes don't think, we react. And so the inner resource practice is such an important practice because it helps us to self-regulate, but also it gives us, it's an empowering tool. It allows us or reminds us that actually I don't have to be just going with being drawn to all the different or pulled into all different directions with my changing emotions. and that I don't need my external circumstances to be perfect in order for me to feel a sense of peace or groundedness. In fact, I have something that I can tap into anytime I need that's already here.
The interesting thing is because life gives us so many opportunities to practice inner resource. So although we might practice it in the iRest integrative restoration yoga nidra meditation practice, life gives you so many opportunities right away. And so it's interesting, as life unfolds and brings these opportunities, like in my life, for example, I'm always amazed because there's also, I believe, a brain relation and anatomical relation, because as we practice it more, the synapses are changing, the connectivity in our brains are changing. So they're no longer, maybe for some people, wired, or for us even, to go into that defensive, that habitual pattern that might have served us when, at some point, but maybe no longer serves us, and reconnect. So many times I've like, wow, I'm actually feeling like that even though we're disagreeing, neither one of us are yelling, neither one of us are being mean. We're able to say that we disagree without feeling any discomfort in the body, but being able to notice and be aware that there is no discomfort in the body as I'm sharing, honestly, that I disagree with, somebody, especially loved ones, right? Which is difficult, and especially maybe with familial loved ones, where you have this pattern of, cyclical, of triggering each other, even unintentionally. So it's such an interesting practice because it really serves us. The more we do it, it's actually changing the way our brain and our habitual patterns work.
Yeah, I mean, everything feeds the nervous system, right? So if we are always in this state of feeling as though we're threatened or feeling as though we have to be in defensive mode, then those are the neural pathways that we're strengthening, right? We're teaching our bodies that this world is not safe. And so when challenges come up, it's a threat and I need to protect myself. And when we're in that mode, our thinking mind is not really quite online. Like when we are feeling under threat, we like to think that we think logically, but it's actually very hard for us to tap into that thinking mind and have be able to tap into that logical thinking when we are in that mode. And so for us to be able to find a way back into the more parasympathetic state where we're more relaxed and we're calm, then we actually have access to the higher brain functions again. And, and I know that we love talking about the polyvagal theory. Um, but one of the concepts that I love about the polyvagal theory is really about how can we help the nervous system to come back to a sense of safety. Because when that doesn't happen, a lot of the things that we want for ourselves, that finding that inner peace and having good relationships and making good choices, all those things are just a little bit harder to achieve when we're not in that state of that calm and relaxed state. And so what I find with the inner resource is it's while it's wonderful to have that place of feeling safe and secure within yourself, it really is like you're saying that it's changing our the way that our neural pathways are working, it's changing our nervous system. It's helping us to tap into that, uh, that state, the nervous system state, which allows us to have relationships, which allows us to have ways to communicate with loved ones in a way that's not threatening. And it helps us to then actually tap into the higher brain process in which we can actually start to think about consequences or, our actions and consequences, which sometimes is a little bit harder when we're in that state of feeling threatened. And so, the inner resource, I think we can go on and on, but if nothing else, if this is the only practice that you take with you is to have a practice of the inner resource, I think that this can totally transform your life.
I agree. What you're saying actually made me think about even within the educational forum as teachers are recognizing, and then students are being educated, everybody learning more about the brain and, the polyvagal system. There's less sort of, good or bad, right? Like there's a recognition that, okay, that student's not ready to learn because something's happened. Maybe they've come to school, something happened at home. They're all in their sympathetic nervous system and they're not being bad. They're just not ready to learn. They're not in their prefrontal cortex anymore. So maybe we can take a moment. So that recognition, the teacher's not a bad person for maybe not recognizing it right away. Maybe this student has a history of maybe whatever. And so maybe the teacher missed it and then they realize that something else is amiss, right? And then they can recognize, oh, okay, we can do something else. Maybe we can do some breathing, because a lot of the schools nowadays, thankfully, have those in place. Or there's so many things online now. You can easily Google like breathing technique or, some kind of mindful movement that brings them back to their prefrontal cortex. And then, of course, they're so much easier to teach and to communicate with, right? And nobody has to feel good or bad or wrong or right anymore.
Yeah. And, to this point, I mean, according to the polyvagal theory, is that our nervous systems, we co-regulate. So you don't need to even verbally communicate with someone to send out signals of whether it be safety and calmness, or you might be sending out signals of threat and danger, right? And so the beautiful thing about co-regulation is that even if someone is coming in anxious and, in that sympathetic state, that if you're able to remain grounded yourself and express this feeling of safety through your nervous system, the other person their nervous system will sense your nervous system, and then you start to kind of find an alignment there, which is really great. But then, of course, if, say, in the teacher student scenario, that if the teacher is, dysregulated, and then the students are coming in dysregulated, and then it's almost like you're driving up this sense of, everyone is just highly aroused in a way that's not constructive, right? Or activated. And so I think that when we start to introduce this inner resource practice to everyone, imagine, right, what could happen if we're knowingly able to tap into this sense of safety where we can bring our nervous system back to a calm state. And then the teacher is now meeting the students in this state and maybe helping to co-regulate their nervous system. And then there's a kind of a ripple effect that can go into the whole class. Um, One thing that was really interesting for me is that I recently just adopted my foster dog. I had been fostering a dog for over a month, and then we just recently adopted her. And she gets really hyperactive when she sees other dogs. So she's not aggressive, but she gets super, super excited. And so I took her into a trainer for an evaluation to see how he can help her with this behavior. And then the trainer's like, okay, I'm going to pull out 5 of my dogs and let's see how she reacts. And then we went out and she was completely calm. We circled around all the dogs and she's just like, huh, I'm good. And she's like, and at one point, the trainer even took out his dog, which is a male, intact male, huge dog, very intimidating. And she just went over, sniffed him a little bit, nothing crazy at all. And I'm like to the trainer, this is not my dog. Like, what did you do? What's happening? Like, how can she be so calm? And one of the things that he said was, when I train all the other dogs to be calm, then you walk into this energy and the dog knows this energy and then they calm down. And then I'm like, of course I know this, Of course it makes so
So the
much
dogs are
sense.
practicing meditation and holding space for your dog. Oh my gosh, I love that.
Yeah. So
Eh,
if the dogs like can so instinctively just pick up those cues, can you imagine if we can be a little bit more mindful and be able to, bring this beautiful practice in and help each other co-regulate our nervous system?
So as an educator, it's interesting. So using workshops and other, meeting people sort of more cognitively, which I think oftentimes is sort of, I guess, because, going to university to become a teacher, a lot of it's done sort of more intellectually. So being able to teach teachers about all of this intellectually, and then maybe giving them a time and space to experience it, I think leads to sort of being able to embody it, so whichever pathway for anybody. But I feel like a lot of times now that there's so many workshops, it's so open and welcomed in teaching and in schools and even in universities now, they're offering a lot of programs around mindfulness and meditation. It's wonderful because then now they're able to experience it intellectually through research and studying, and then experience it and then embody it, and then hopefully, like you said, that resonation, because they're already self-regulated without even, you don't even have to be conscious of it if you're already self-regulated, and things like that don't phase you anymore. There's no right or wrong or good or bad anymore, no shame.
Yeah, yeah, no, so I'm really excited that this is becoming more, people are becoming more aware, not just the benefits of meditation, but that, like you say, it's not that necessarily that the students are being bad when they're misbehaving, and perhaps when we can bring in this compassion, um, we start to understand that there's no other way for this person to be when their nervous system is in that state. Like they can't learn, they can't, they can't sit still and be quiet and focus and concentrate when the nervous system is in a certain state. And so for us to have these practices, and we can teach the teachers and we teach the students that, I hope that it's going to just benefit everyone involved.
And I love that the, of course, animals, right? Of course, animals. And one nice thing I think is oftentimes, maybe not all of them, because there are some working dogs, they don't have to worry about the cognitive part, right? They just do it. So it's beautiful. And you make me actually even think about trees, not that they necessarily exactly self-regulate, but there's some kind of connection that plants and nature has, um, that in some ways I think are more advanced than us, because sometimes our thinking gets in the way and outshines, the inner resource. Where I feel like a lot of times in nature, um, they're just their survival, part of their survival mechanism is something like an inner resource, where they, there's this unchangingness in nature, that they can connect with one another and connect with themselves and be okay with um, dying and growing, so it's an interesting thing. There's a lot we can learn from other creatures, right, on earth.
Yeah, because they're just being in the present moment to moment, which is something that we struggle so much with because of our, big brains that we're so proud of, but it's the very thing that's also keeping us from finding that inner peace.
So what can we give as an example for inner resource, perhaps? Like maybe in sort of the atmosphere or students that you have, is there some example or suggestion you could give for inner resource?
Yeah, one of the things that we did in the teacher training was that I brought in all sorts of things. Like I had essential oils, I had different textures, some soft, some rough, some smooth, some hard. I had brought in some chocolate for to stimulate taste buds, but of course, if chocolate's not your thing, you might try something else. Maybe it's a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something. Um, and or maybe certain sounds. Maybe you love to hear nature sounds, or maybe there's a piece of music or a chime or something. Um, and then maybe, there might be some imagery. Maybe there are colors or photos or something. You can use all your senses to and experiment. If this is your first time, play with different things. Are there certain things that bring you a sense of feeling at ease? Like maybe there's a picture or a place or a smell or sound that makes you feel like, oh, my body can relax a little. So that's one of the ways that I thought it was really fun. For my students to find their inner resource. So for anyone who's new, maybe start to play around with these things. What can you use to stimulate your five senses that help your body to come to a place where you can feel a little more relaxed, where you feel like you can breathe a little easier, where your body can feel a little more at ease, um, where you might feel, a little safer, a little more secure, a little bit more grounded. And then, so I think that might be an interesting way in. And if you don't have any physical things or material things to play with, you can use visualizations if that works. So, is there a certain place or a memory or something that helps you to come to this feeling of, oh, my body can relax a little bit? Or a lot, right? If you can access your inner resource, if there's a place that make you feel completely safe, yeah, go there. But also know that some students or some people have a hard time to find that complete safety or security because they've never really experienced it in their lifetime. And then I might suggest, is there a place where you feel okay? Or is there something that makes you feel okay just as you are? And then so we'll experiment with that. And then once they have that thing that helps them to feel into that sense of relaxation or safety or okayness in the body, then we would just say continue with that. Visit that place often, but don't just go to that place in your visualization or hold on to that object or whatnot. Once you're there, feel the body. Where do sensations show up when you feel safe or okay or relaxed? And then we start to bring that into the focus. Do I feel sensations in my belly or my chest or anywhere else when I feel relaxed? What are the sensations that come up? Is it heavy? Is it light? What might you notice about them? Because that's your true inner resource, is that felt sense in the body. And then the suggestion would then just be keep going back to that place to feel all those things in the body until you can feel so strong in within yourself that perhaps you don't need those objects or visualization to feel in your body that sense of your inner resource.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's such an interesting thing, but being playful with it, right? Like maybe first starting with tangible. And I feel like there's often this mind body, we've talked about it before, sort of this connection and disconnection with people, um, that they need to get back with connecting with themselves. So maybe even as a practice, just in everyday life, it could be playful with your family. We're somewhere special. What do you see? What do you hear? Bringing in the senses all the time, like especially maybe during a dinner. We don't have the adjectives sometimes. We don't have the words because we're not used to doing it. So when we work with somebody, they don't have the adjectives, right? But if we make it sort of just an everyday practice, and then realizing like, oh, this food is so nourishing. Oh my gosh, like the sense, I can smell the different spices, and I feel the warmth in my belly. I can feel the full, making it part of our habit to use all our senses. Because I really feel the more I have been sort of back and forth with iRest has helped me experience life more and travel more, and reverse too, because I have this experience in life, I can bring it deeper into the iRest practice. So it's a beautiful thing, maybe just using your senses more and more as little and often, right? As part of just your everyday experience to enrich or to cultivate the inner resource.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah.
So I guess we'll see what people find, if they have any insight as they use all their senses and then feel into their inner resource. Maybe they can share their experiences with us. Yeah, you take care, eh? I'll see you next
Yeah,
time.
thank you, Jen.
See
See you
ya.
next time.